The general's laughter. The Galactic Council chamber glittered with gold and silver as alien delegates from dozens of worlds gathered to hear the latest intelligence reports from Earth. At the center of the room, standing tall in armor, polished, until it shone like fire, was General Zorath of the Krith Dominion, a warrior feared across 3 star systems. His deep voice echoed with confidence as he presented his findings. Earth, he declared, was nothing more than a primitive backwater, inhabited by fragile creatures with laughable armies. Their machines were crude, their fleets almost non-existent, and their tactics drawn from an ancient past that no true galactic power would consider effective. As his words carried across the chamber, waves of laughter rolled among the alien leaders. Some smirked, others jeered, and many dismissed the very notion of humanity being a threat. Zorath thrived in the center of attention, his piercing eyes glittering with arrogance as he mocked humanity's attempts to build a defense network around their blue planet. He compared their soldiers to children playing war with wooden sticks, their tanks to crawling insects easily crushed, and their fleets to toys drifting helplessly in space. Among the assembly, a few voices spoke with caution, reminding the Council of Earth's classification as a death world, a rare world where survival was brutal and only the most adaptable species could thrive. But Zorath dismissed these concerns with a sneer. He claimed that humanity's survival on such a planet only proved they were stubborn animals, incapable of true strategy when faced with real interstellar might. He told stories of how easily his soldiers had conquered worlds far more advanced than Earth, and each tale brought more laughter. To the untrained ear, his voice was music, but beneath the surface it carried venom, the certainty of a predator mocking prey before the kill. Far away on Earth, humans were not blind to this ridicule. Intelligence leaks and intercepted broadcasts ensured that Earth's leaders knew how the galaxy viewed them. Military councils gathered in dimly lit rooms, watching recordings of Zorath's speeches, the sneer on his face, the way alien crowds cheered his insults. Some officials clenched their fists in anger, others burned with quiet determination. They knew that being underestimated was both an insult and an opportunity. Humanity had faced extinction countless times before, not from alien armies but from plagues, disasters, and wars of their own making. Each time, they had risen again, scarred but stronger. This arrogance from the alien general was nothing new in their history. Humanity had heard the laughter of empires before, and each time the laughter had ended in silence. Zorath was not done with words alone. He swore before the Council that he would crush Earth with a single campaign. He promised that within weeks, humanity's armies would kneel, their cities would burn, and their leaders would beg for mercy. His laughter filled the chamber as he declared that he would make Earth a lesson to any other species that dared to resist the Dominion. He did not realize that the lesson waiting for him would be his own. While alien leaders raised goblets of crystalline wine in celebration of Zorath's promises, Earth's commanders sharpened their resolve. They knew the war would come, and they knew they could not meet the aliens in open fields with sheer numbers or towering fleets. But Earth had its own weapons, weapons that no alien could truly understand. Their planet itself was one, forged by volcanoes, shaped by earthquakes, torn by storms and soaked in floods. Earth had always been a crucible, and humans were its tempered steel. In secret bunkers, scientists whispered of projects hidden from alien eyes, technologies designed not to compete in the galactic game, but to use Earth's own fury as a shield and a sword. Soldiers trained not only with rifles but with the knowledge of terrain, of how to turn mountains, jungles, and deserts into allies. Every disaster Earth had ever suffered had become part of their playbook. They would not stop the invasion from coming, but they would make sure that when it did, the invaders would face something no simulation could predict. Back in the council chamber, General Zorath lifted his armored fist high and shouted that he would personally plant the Dominions' banner on Earth's capital within a month. The crowd erupted in roars of approval. Yet far away on the blue world that spun quietly in the void, humanity prepared in silence. There was no laughter there, only the steady heartbeat of determination. For though the general mocked them, they knew a truth that had been written in their history again and again. Arrogance blinds, and underestimation kills. And somewhere deep in the earth itself, as if in response to the alien threats hurled across the stars, a quiet tremor rippled through the ground, unnoticed by most. But to those who felt it, it was as though the planet itself had stirred, ready to join its children in the coming storm. Humanity's resolve. The news of the alien general's mockery spread quickly across Earth, and though it stung with insult, it did not break the spirit of humanity. For there was something within the people of Earth that had always thrived in the face of challenge. Across continents, leaders met in secured rooms and underground command centers where maps of the stars lit the walls and voices spoke in hushed tones. They knew the invasion was not a question of if, but of when, and they also knew that the Dominion would not show mercy. Humanity had been underestimated and ridiculed before by its own kind throughout history. Empires had risen thinking themselves invincible, only to crumble against the unexpected force of determined men and women who refused to yield. Earth's history was a tapestry woven with wars and plagues and disasters, yet each time humanity had not simply survived but had adapted, learned, and grown stronger. That spirit had not faded. It burned brighter than ever now in the face of this looming alien threat. In the underground war rooms, military commanders gathered around glowing displays of troop movements. They studied not only their own capabilities, but the terrain of their home world with the precision of master chess players. They did not see forests, deserts, mountains, and oceans as mere landscapes. They saw allies, weapons that had been tested by millions of years of chaos and fury. Earth was not a gentle world, and those born upon it carried that same unforgiving strength in their bones. A human general stood before his peers and spoke words that captured the mood of the moment. He said, "They do not understand us, and they do not understand this world. They believe we will fight them on their terms, but we will not. We will fight as Earth has always taught us. With every weapon, with every storm, with every grain of soil." His words were met with nods and fierce eyes. Meanwhile, scientists and engineers worked tirelessly in hidden laboratories. They were not racing to build massive fleets to match the Dominion. They knew they could not compete in sheer scale. Instead, they turned their focus to ingenuity. Projects long kept in the shadows were suddenly brought to light. Devices that could harness seismic activity, systems designed to predict and trigger controlled collapses of terrain, experimental weather manipulation tools that could summon storms over battlefields. These were not mere weapons. They were embodiments of Earth's fury given form through human innovation. They called these efforts Operation Gaia, a plan to fight alongside the planet itself. Ordinary people were not blind to what was happening either. In towns and cities, civilians prepared in their own ways. Volunteers flocked to training camps, where they learned survival tactics, how to navigate forests, how to endure long nights in the cold, how to live off the land should their homes be taken. Farmers donated supplies, miners offered knowledge of the underground, and students studied both science and history with newfound purpose, for they knew every skill might one day mean the difference between survival and annihilation. Humanity was uniting in a way it had not done for centuries, driven by the understanding that the threat ahead was not a distant war, but a battle for existence itself. At night, soldiers patrolled the coasts and skies, watching the stars with uneasy eyes, waiting for the first signs of the Dominion fleet. Families said goodbyes that carried the weight of uncertainty, but also the strength of belief that their sacrifices mattered. There was fear, yes, but within that fear lived courage, and within that courage lived defiance. It was the same defiance that had carried explorers across oceans, that had driven inventors to reach for the skies, and that had once sent astronauts into the black void of space with nothing but fragile ships and hope. Back in the Galactic Council, alien observers mocked the reports they received of Earth's preparations, dismissing them as desperate gestures of a doomed species. Yet what they could not see was the fire burning beneath those preparations, the invisible resolve that pulsed through every human heart. They could not understand what it meant to be shaped by a death world, to grow up under skies that could erupt in storms without warning, to live where the ground could quake, where beasts could hunt, where survival itself was a daily challenge. To the aliens, these were weaknesses. To humanity, they were training. As the days passed and the invasion drew nearer, Earth's leaders continued their quiet coordination. They chose not to broadcast their strategies to the stars. Instead, they cloaked their intentions in silence, allowing the Dominion to remain blinded by arrogance. But within that silence, plans sharpened, alliances strengthened, and humanity's ancient instinct for survival awakened like a sleeping beast. The world that had been mocked as fragile was no longer passive. Earth itself seemed to sense the tension. Storms grew restless across oceans, and the earth rumbled faintly beneath the soil. It was as if the planet was waiting, holding its breath alongside its people, ready to answer the call when the first shot of war finally came. The alien advance. The day finally came when the stars above Earth flickered with unnatural light as the Dominion fleet emerged from the void, their warships like jagged mountains of metal cutting across the sky. The fleet was vast beyond imagination, with cruisers stretching miles long and carriers releasing smaller attack ships in endless streams. The alien General Zorath stood upon the command deck of his flagship, a towering vessel plated with black alloy and bristling with weapons forged from the industries of a dozen conquered worlds. His eyes glowed with triumph, for this was the moment. He had promised the Galactic Council the moment when Earth would be humbled before the might of the Dominion. He expected the humans to tremble, to scatter and beg for mercy, yet what he saw when his fleet entered orbit puzzled him. The humans did not panic. They did not broadcast pleas. They were silent, watching and waiting. The first strikes came swiftly, as Dominion bombardment ships unleashed torrents of energy down upon Earth's surface, targeting military installations and communication hubs. Explosions rippled across landscapes, and alien crews laughed in confidence as plumes of smoke rose into the atmosphere. Yet when the dust cleared, they found far fewer casualties than expected, and entire sectors that should have been destroyed stood untouched. Unknown to the invaders, Earth had long prepared false installations, decoys built to draw enemy fire, while the true command centers lay buried deep within mountains and hidden beneath oceans. Zorath's eyes narrowed at the reports, and though he barked orders to press forward, there was a flicker of irritation in his voice. Across the globe, humans enacted the second phase of their plan. They did not attempt to meet the alien war machine head-on in open battle. Instead, they retreated strategically into the terrain that had raised them. Soldiers vanished into jungles where humidity clogged alien sensors. Armored vehicles withdrew into deserts where sandstorms concealed their movements. Fleets dispersed into the oceans, leaving only silent waves above their hidden submarines. From the alien perspective, it looked like cowardice, a retreat of a species already broken. But, in truth, it was the tightening of a trap. Humanity did not need to win the skies on the first day. They needed only to endure and lure the enemy closer to the heart of their world. Zorath ordered his ground forces to deploy. Massive troop carriers descended into Earth's atmosphere, carrying thousands of armored warriors from across the Dominion. They landed with thunder in forests, plains, and cities, their weapons humming with energy and their vehicles crushing streets beneath metal treads. They expected terrified civilians and scattered militias. What they encountered instead were empty avenues, abandoned buildings, and silence that pressed heavy on their ears. The human population had not waited helplessly. They had vanished into tunnels, shelters, and wilderness, leaving only shadows behind. For the first time, unease stirred among the Dominion troops. In hidden bunkers, Earth's commanders watched the alien landings with grim satisfaction. They had studied the general and his methods, and they knew he would overextend himself quickly, deploying his forces too broadly in an attempt to claim quick victory. Already, Dominion divisions spread thin across continents, far from their supply, ships in orbit, vulnerable to the land they did not understand. The alien general laughed, at first declaring the humans were running, but as days stretched into weeks, his laughter grew less frequent. His armies marched through unfamiliar territory that resisted them with every step. Tanks sank in marshes, soldiers collapsed in heat they could not endure. Machines froze in mountain passes where the cold bit deeper than any weapon. What Zorath had dismissed as primitive terrain was revealing itself as an enemy deadlier than he had expected. Alien scouts reported strange movements, sudden attacks that struck like lightning and vanished into the wilderness. A squad would disappear, in a canyon never to return. A convoy would be swallowed by a landslide seemingly triggered at the perfect moment. Communications grew strained as storms surged across oceans, disrupting signals. Each setback frustrated the general, but he still told himself it was temporary, that humans were weak animals hiding behind their world's chaos. Yet beneath that bravado, a seed of doubt began to take root. For every advance his armies made, the humans seemed to be watching, guiding them deeper into unfamiliar land. It was no longer conquest, it was pursuit, and the hunters were not the ones wearing Dominion colors. The alien general stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the planet below, his jaw clenched. He could see Earth's oceans glittering under sunlight, its continents wrapped in green and brown, its clouds swirling with storms. To him, it had once seemed a jewel waiting to be plucked, but now, as reports of attrition mounted, he began to sense something more. Earth was not simply a world, it was a battlefield alive with defiance. He had promised swift victory to the Council, but now he realized victory here might not come swiftly at all, and with every hour that passed, he felt the ground shifting beneath his feet, though he was still far above the planet. The ground shake's General Zorath had grown impatient as weeks turned into months of what he believed was a needless war of attrition. He had promised the Council swift conquest, yet his forces still struggled to gain a foothold on Earth. His commanders reported victories, but they were hollow, for every city taken slipped into ruin before they could claim it. Every supply line was stretched too thin, and every advancement came at the cost of soldiers worn down by terrain they could not master. Zorath decided it was time to end the game of shadows and drive humanity into the open. He gathered his armies into vast formations across the plains of North America, where he believed the humans would finally be forced into a decisive battle. His ships hovered above like black clouds blotting out the sun, while the Dominion's banners fluttered against the wind. He laughed again before his subordinates, boasting that the age of Earth was about to end, and that no terrain, no storm, and no primitive strategy could save them. On the surface, human commanders watched with cold determination. They had anticipated this very arrogance from the general. Rather than fearing his concentrated power, they saw opportunity. The plains where the Dominion gathered were not ordinary stretches of land. They sat above fault lines and deep, unstable rock that had slumbered for centuries. Humanity had prepared for this moment with precision. Seismic devices buried in secret had been waiting, and scientists monitoring the shifting tectonic plates now gave the order. When Dominion walkers marched forward with thunderous steps, the ground beneath them began to tremble. At first, the aliens thought it was some quirk of the unstable world, but within minutes the tremors grew into violent quakes that split the soil open. Entire columns of armored vehicles toppled into fissures that yawned like the mouths of giants. Soldiers cried out as the land itself betrayed them, swallowing whole squads and breaking apart the perfect formations the general had so proudly arranged. The sky was filled with dust as great cracks spread for miles, tearing through alien camps and leaving their once orderly lines scattered in chaos. Zorath watched in disbelief as what he thought was firm ground shattered under the weight of his forces. His laughter caught in his throat, replaced by a growl of frustration. But the quakes were only the beginning. Human forces had studied the weather patterns for months, preparing to turn the sky itself into a weapon. As the ground continued to shake, storms began to rise with unnatural speed. Clouds darkened, thunder rolled, and sheets of rain poured down. Lightning arced across the battlefield, striking alien machinery and frying circuits in their armored suits. Mud replaced stable soil, turning the field into a morass where Dominion tanks sank helplessly. The aliens tried to regroup, but every attempt was thwarted as the very environment shifted against them. From the cover of forests and hidden bunkers, humanity struck. Guerrilla units emerged like shadows, firing with precision before disappearing back into cover. Drones darted through the storm, guided by human pilots who knew every contour of the land. Mines buried long before detonated in perfect synchrony, with the quakes tearing through enemy lines. To the aliens, it seemed as though Earth itself had joined the fight. Every attempt to advance was answered not by soldiers alone, but by the fury of the world beneath their feet and the sky above their heads. The general roared with rage as his forces reported loss after loss. He demanded explanations from his commanders, who could only stammer about the quakes, the storms, the endless traps. He cursed the planet, calling it cursed and unnatural. Yet deep down he began to understand what he had refused to believe. Humanity was not fighting alone. Their world was their weapon, and they had spent centuries learning how to survive its fury. They had now turned that knowledge against him. On the ground, Dominion soldiers no longer marched with confidence. They trudged through mud, fearing that every step might collapse into a fissure, that every rumble in the distance might herald another quake. Their morale cracked faster than the soil beneath them, and whispers spread among the ranks that Earth was alive, and that it had chosen its side. In the hidden command posts, human generals watched as data streamed in showing the collapse of Dominion formations. They did not celebrate, for the war was not won, but there was a grim satisfaction in seeing the mighty alien army falter not before advanced fleets or overwhelming firepower, but before the simple truth of Earth's resilience. Humanity had endured storms, earthquakes, and floods long before the Dominion had ever risen. Now those trials were weapons in their hands. General Zorath stood silent at the viewport of his flagship, his fists clenched so tight the metal of his gauntlet screeched. Below him the battlefield was a vision of chaos, his proud army scattered, the ground torn apart, the sky aflame with lightning. For the first time in his long career he felt not triumph but unease. He had laughed at Earth's military, mocked their weakness and sworn their destruction. Yet as he watched the land itself rise in defiance, he realized with chilling clarity that he had underestimated not just the humans, but the world that birthed them. The ground had shaken, and with it, his confidence began to crack. Humanity strikes. Back, the chaos that followed the quakes and storms left the Dominion army reeling in confusion. Their once flawless formations had crumbled, their towering machines trapped in mud or swallowed by gaping fissures, their soldiers scattered and afraid of the very ground they stood upon. For the first time, General Zorath saw hesitation in the eyes of his warriors. A hesitation that spread like wildfire across his ranks. He shouted for them to regroup, to press forward and crush the humans hiding in the shadows. But his words carried less power than the rumble beneath their boots and the thunder above their heads. He had promised swift conquest, yet the longer his soldiers lingered, the more Earth seemed to turn against them. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for. From hidden bunkers buried deep in mountains, from underground tunnels carved beneath cities, and from forests that blanketed entire regions, human forces emerged with precision. They did not march in endless lines or gather in open fields. They struck in small, coordinated units guided by knowledge of terrain no alien could ever match. Guerrilla warfare became their weapon. Ambushes set with careful patience, traps sprung at the exact moment when Dominion soldiers were most vulnerable. A convoy of alien walkers trudged through a canyon in South America, its walls rising high above them. The soldiers inside felt safe, surrounded by the metal of their machines, until the canyon itself collapsed in a controlled detonation triggered by human engineers. Tons of rock and soil buried the convoy in an instant, silencing their weapons before they ever had the chance to fire. In the deserts of Africa, sandstorms whipped across Dominion patrols, blinding their vision, and from the haze came swift-moving human strike teams who struck with rifles and rocket fire before vanishing once again into the storm. In the frozen tundra of Siberia, Dominion equipment froze solid as temperatures dropped below their tolerances, and hidden squads of human snipers picked them off one by one. Everywhere the story was the same. The Dominion held superior numbers, superior weapons, and superior fleets, but they lacked the one thing that humanity possessed in abundance: adaptability. Humans had survived every environment their world had hurled at them, and now they were using that knowledge as a weapon sharper than any blade. General Zorath watched reports flood in, and each one carried the same grim message. His forces were losing ground, not to armies that could be measured, but to shadows, to the world itself, to an enemy that struck and disappeared like ghosts. In the heart of Earth's command network, human leaders remained calm. They did not need to boast or shout. Their satisfaction was quiet, their focus sharp. They knew this was only the beginning, that victory would not be won in a single strike but through endurance. Operation Gaia was unfolding exactly as designed, using Earth's fury to disorient and weaken the invaders until humanity could strike decisively. Generals studied maps where Dominion positions flickered like dying embers, each outpost and camp marked not for frontal assault, but for isolation and collapse. Civilians played their part as well. Farmers guided soldiers through backroads invisible to alien eyes. Children carried messages across ruined cities faster than any machine could track. Entire villages vanished into wilderness when Dominion forces approached, only to reappear behind enemy lines supplying the fighters. Humanity had become not just an army but a movement, a collective force bound together by the knowledge that their survival depended on unity. General Zorath tried to rally his commanders, but doubt gnawed at the edges of his pride. He had thought Earth's people fragile, yet they were proving relentless. He had thought their world weak, yet it struck harder than any weapon in his arsenal. He had thought his victory inevitable, yet now he watched his forces bleed in a war that seemed endless. The laughter that had once carried him in the council chamber was gone, replaced by silence as he stood before the view screen staring at the stubborn world below. For humanity, this silence was a victory of its own. They knew that arrogance had cracked, and once arrogance breaks, fear follows. The ground had shaken, the storms had raged, and now it was humanity's turn to strike back with teeth bared and hearts unbroken. The war was far from over, but the tide was shifting, and the alien general who had mocked them now faced an enemy he no longer understood. The Dominion forces that had once marched with iron confidence now found themselves moving through a land that seemed to shift and fight against them at every step. General Zorath had watched his formations torn apart by quakes and storms, but even then he had clung to the belief that his numbers and weapons would eventually break the resistance. Yet in the days that followed, it became clear the battle was no longer about numbers or weapons. It was about survival, and survival was something humanity had been perfecting since the first spark of their history. In the forests of the Amazon Dominion, soldiers advanced carefully through dense vegetation, their scanners pulsing with light as they searched for hidden enemies. To them, the jungle was nothing more than hostile terrain filled with heat and insects, but to the humans who grew up in its shadows, it was a shield and a weapon. Entire squads of Dominion troops disappeared when vines snapped from above and pits collapsed beneath them, traps carved by human hands and concealed by nature itself. Gunfire echoed briefly, and then silence returned, leaving the forest to reclaim the bodies without a trace. In the deserts, Dominion armored vehicles crawled forward, under a sun so bright it burned through their helmets. They relied on heavy machinery to carry them through the endless sand, but the machines became their weakness. Bursts of heat distorted vision, shifting dunes concealed mines, and sandstorms rose without warning. Within the storms, human units moved unseen, guided by instincts passed through generations who had learned to survive with little water and endless wind. They struck with rockets and rifles, their attacks lasting only minutes before they vanished back into the storm, leaving behind confusion and broken machines. In the cities, humanity fought in silence. Skyscrapers that once housed offices became watchtowers, subway tunnels became arteries of movement, and every collapsed building concealed hidden paths. Dominion patrols found themselves walking through empty streets where windows stared at them like eyes. The humans were not gone. They were watching, waiting, striking when the enemy turned a corner or when an armored vehicle stalled in rubble. For the aliens, the cities were abandoned ruins. For the humans, they were hunting grounds. General Zorath received these reports with growing anger. His commanders described shadows they could not catch, enemies who appeared only to vanish, machines destroyed without warning, supply lines cut by unseen hands. He raged at his subordinates, calling them incompetent, yet even he could not deny the truth. The humans were not meeting him in open battle. They were unmaking his army piece by piece. He had not marched into a conquest. He had marched into a labyrinth where every turn cut deeper into his strength. What unsettled him most was not only the losses but the will of the enemy. Dominion soldiers were trained to conquer quickly, to break opponents before they could resist. But humanity did not break. Civilians carried supplies through ruined streets, Farmers opened their barns to shelter fighters. Students hacked communication lines to disrupt alien signals. Every human seemed part of the war effort, not bound by rank or uniform but by the knowledge that they fought for the survival of their world. The silence of Earth's skies was another weapon. No desperate broadcasts for surrender, no cries for help to other species, only silence that seemed to mock him more than words ever could. That silence told him humanity had no intention of yielding, that they believed victory was possible even against his overwhelming strength. In his pride, he had promised the Council swift victory, but now even he could not see the end. On the ground, human units moved with growing confidence. They had turned the first waves of disaster into opportunity, and now with the enemy disoriented, they pressed their advantage. Coordinated strikes cut through enemy convoys, ambushes dismantled, squads in hours, and drones guided by human pilots slipped through the storms to strike ships on the ground. Earth itself seemed alive with resistance. Every mountain, every river, every storm becoming a shield for its children. The general who had once laughed now stood silent on his flagship. His army was bleeding, his promise of swift conquest was dissolving, and the humans he had mocked were striking with precision and fury. The tide of battle had shifted, and though he still commanded the larger force, he began to feel a shadow creeping into his thoughts. It was the shadow of realization that he had underestimated not only a species, but an entire world that had taught them how to endure. Humanity was striking back not with the strength of one army but with the soul of their planet, and the Dominion was beginning to falter. The generals reckoning. The Dominion forces reeled as the humans continued to turn every battlefield into a nightmare of uncertainty and destruction. General Zorath could feel his patience and pride cracking with each report from the front lines. The forests that were supposed to conceal nothing more than small groups of insurgents now seemed alive. With invisible hunters, the humans struck with such speed and coordination that entire units vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The general's plans of overwhelming force crumbled in silence and chaos. His warships loomed above cities, expecting submission but found only storms of fire and smoke guided by invisible hands. From the deserts came reports of mechanical columns trapped in sandstorms that seemed to rise at the humans' command and strike without warning. The alien. Soldiers who once marched with confidence were now cautious, fearful, and unsure. Every step forward felt like a trap. Zorath summoned his commanders aboard the flagship demanding answers, yet no report comforted him. Every plan had failed, every maneuver had been anticipated and countered. The humans did not rely solely on weapons or technology. They relied on adaptability, courage, and a connection to their world that no machine could replicate. Intelligence networks disrupted Dominion communications, leaving commanders isolated as human teams moved through cities, forests, and wastelands like shadows that refused to be captured or killed. Civilians carried supplies hid, fighters guided armored vehicles into ambushes and sabotaged fuel lines. Everything they touched became a weapon against the invaders. Zorath realized that the humans were not just fighting for territory or victory, they were fighting for survival, and that gave them a strength he had never seen. In the skies, the Dominion fleets attempted to suppress human air defenses, but their lasers and missiles were met with silence. The humans had anticipated every strike. They dodged, disrupted, guided, and ambushed, leaving the invaders with empty ammunition and damaged ships in the ground. Human artillery that seemed sparse at first now rained fire with precision. The humans had learned to use even the smallest pieces of equipment against the largest machines. The Dominion soldiers who had laughed at the primitive weapons of Earth now found themselves flattened and trapped by ingenuity they could not predict or counter. Zorath walked the bridge of his flagship feeling the weight of defeat before it even arrived. He had underestimated an entire species. The humans of Earth had turned survival into an art form. They had woven the terrain, the weather, and the chaos of battle into a weapon more effective than any fleet or army. His pride and arrogance had blinded him to the reality of their resilience. The generals of his own forces whispered fears he could not ignore. Reports of mutiny and desertion reached him. As morale plummeted, his army that once marched with unstoppable force, now fractured and vulnerable. On the surface, the humans pushed harder there, attacks coordinated across every battlefield, their numbers seemingly multiplied by the spirit of the planet itself. The Dominion armies that had laughed at Earth's defenses now scrambled for cover and coordination, even their warships were forced to retreat under precise strikes from hidden launch sites, humans who could appear and vanish without warning, human pilots who struck, then disappeared into storms and mountains. Their strategy was not to confront the Dominion directly, but to make every move costly, every advance painful, and every victory Pyrrhic. Zorath realized too late that victory was no longer possible, even if his ships and troops outnumbered the humans 10-1. The general who had once laughed at the primitive soldiers now stared in silence as reports of destruction continued to mount. Cities that were supposed to bend to his rule were filled with humans moving with purpose and precision. Villages that were supposed to surrender were reinforced with fighters and traps. Every corner of the planet seemed alive with resistance. Every step he had taken now revealed more human cunning than he had ever imagined. The shock of their ingenuity hit him harder than any missile or weapon. Their ability to adapt, fight, and endure in perfect harmony with the world itself was a lesson he could not ignore. He ordered retreats, reorganizations, and counterattacks, but every attempt failed. Humans anticipated them. The planet itself seemed to guide them, and the Dominion forces fell into disarray. One by one his fleets were forced back, his armored columns trapped or destroyed, and his pride began to give way to fear. In the midst of all this, Zorath understood the truth that humans were not just fighters or soldiers. They were an unstoppable force of nature themselves, shaped by survival, hardened by adversity, and unbreakable in spirit. Their world had trained them, and now they were showing the galaxy what it meant to challenge humanity and lose humanity's final stand. The sun rose over the shattered plains of the last Dominion stronghold, and the humans moved forward with the precision of a force that had learned from every battle, every mistake, and every loss. Their eyes burned with determination, their hearts synchronized with the rhythm of the planet that had trained them for centuries. They did not hesitate, they did not falter. The alien general who had once laughed at them now watched from his command tower. His pride shattered, his confidence eroded, and his forces broken. The humans had turned every city into a fortress, every forest into a trap, every river and canyon into a weapon against the invaders. The ground itself seemed to rise in rebellion at the command of humanity, and the Dominion soldiers felt fear like a cold shadow crawling over their ranks. Zorath barked orders, but they fell like whispers in a hurricane. The humans anticipated every maneuver, every retreat, every attempt at regrouping. Their warriors moved with silent speed, striking from shadows, leaping from buildings and trees, sabotaging vehicles, disabling communications, and vanishing before retaliation could reach them. Engineers who had once built simple machines now unleashed traps of intricate design, turning every corner into a lethal puzzle. The aliens tried to bombard them from above, but the humans had anticipated orbital strikes and created decoys and countermeasures that made every attack wasteful and dangerous. The ground shook not from earthquakes, but from the precision of human machines that detonated in perfect timing, crushing armored columns and collapsing bunkers. In the midst of the chaos, human commanders coordinated with a calm born of experience and instinct. Every movement planned but seemingly spontaneous, every strike devastating yet efficient. The Dominion soldiers felt their morale crack under the invisible pressure of an enemy that refused to be pinned down. Every loss was magnified by the knowledge that the humans were learning from each encounter, that they adapted and evolved in the heat of battle. Their weapons were crude compared to Dominion technology, yet in the hands of humans they became instruments of chaos and terror. The aliens could not predict or counter. Zorath tried to rally his remaining forces, but even the strongest units faltered under the relentless tide. The humans pressed on with a strategy that combined cunning brutality and the unbreakable will to survive. Cities fell. One by one, under precision strikes, homes were evacuated and used as traps. Civilians fighting alongside soldiers, creating a network of resistance that no alien army could dismantle. The general realized too late that victory had never been possible. The humans had not merely defended their world, they had transformed it into a weapon of unparalleled power and precision. His arrogance and underestimation of the human spirit had doomed him, and now the final reckoning was upon him. From the skies, humans descended in gliders, silently dropping explosives into critical positions, collapsing bridges and disabling artillery. As the ground shook from carefully coordinated detonations, The Dominion forces scrambled desperately trying to respond, but every move was anticipated. Every escape route blocked, every advantage neutralized. Human warriors surged forward from cover to cover, striking with lethal precision, tearing through the enemy lines with courage and skill that defied logic. Their resilience was unmatched, their spirit unbreakable, and their unity absolute. Zorath's warships attempted orbital strikes, but humans had created countermeasures that reflected and absorbed energy, leaving ships damaged and crews demoralized. Every attempt to regroup was met with traps, ambushes, and a relentless push that crushed all resistance. Finally, the general found himself cornered in his command tower, surrounded by the remnants of his once proud army. The humans did not hesitate. They approached with calm determination, ready to end the conflict with efficiency and finality. They had not come to negotiate. They had come to claim victory and ensure that no force could ever threaten Earth again. The alien general fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the realization that he had been defeated by creatures he had mocked, creatures who had turned survival into an art form and bravery into a weapon. As the dust settled and silence returned to the battlefield, the humans stood victorious, the ground still trembling from the calculated force of their attacks. The alien general's laugh was gone, replaced by the hollow echo of defeat. Humanity had not only survived, they had triumphed, shaping the galaxy's understanding of strength, strategy, and unyielding spirit. Their enemies had learned the hard lesson that Earth was not a world to be underestimated, and that humans were predators forged by adversity and perfected by survival. They had risen above every challenge and every enemy, and now the galaxy would never forget the name of those who had stood when others faltered and conquered when all odds were against them. The humans looked at one another, weary but unbroken, proud, but humble, knowing that every victory had been earned and every sacrifice accounted for. The planet itself seemed to breathe with them, a silent witness to their triumph and resilience. Every corner of Earth had become a testament to their ingenuity, courage, and relentless determination. The Dominion forces retreated, leaving behind the ruins of arrogance and pride. Humanity had rewritten the rules of war, teaching the galaxy that no matter the technology, no matter the numbers, the spirit of survival and the will to fight could never be defeated. The Earth that shook the galaxy. The silence after the battle was heavier than any explosion, the air thick with the smell of scorched metal and crushed dreams. Yet the humans moved through the ruins with steady steps, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of lingering threat, their hearts still racing with the rhythm of survival and victory. They did not celebrate loudly, for they understood that triumph was earned, not declared, and that every scar on the land, every fallen enemy, was a testament to the cost of defiance. The alien general was gone, his arrogance and mockery vanished into history, replaced by stories of fear and disbelief that spread like wildfire across the Dominion fleet. Every command ship receiving news of defeat and retreat, their pride shattered by the unexpected force of humans who had turned adversity into strength and weakness into weapon. On the plains where once the invaders had laughed, the humans now walked, as masters of their world, their presence alone radiating the confidence born of facing impossible odds, and emerging victorious cities had been destroyed and rebuilt in hours by automated systems and human ingenuity. Civilians and soldiers working side by side, transforming every ruin into a fortress and every battlefield into a monument to resilience. The Dominion had underestimated the simplicity of human persistence and the complexity of human strategy, believing that machines and numbers alone could overcome a species that had survived pandemics, wars, and environmental collapse across centuries. They learned too late that humans were more than soldiers, more than survivors, more than hunters. They were predators of spirit and mind that adapted to every challenge from orbit. The remaining Dominion vessels retreated, fleeing not from fear of loss, but from fear of learning that their enemy was limitless, that their arrogance had no measure for the depths of human resolve. Earth itself seemed to pulse beneath their feet, as if acknowledging the blood, sweat, and courage poured into the victory, the mountains and rivers, resonating with the energy of a species that had never surrendered, even when all hope seemed lost. Young warriors who had grown up during the invasion now stood as leaders, teaching new strategies and innovations, combining ancient traditions of human combat with technologies scavenged and mastered from the Dominion. The galaxy watched in awe as reports of human victories spread faster than any fleet could travel. Civilizations reconsidered alliances and ambitions, realizing that Earth had become untouchable, that humanity was a force of nature itself, and no enemy could ever fully comprehend the potential of a species forged in struggle. Xorath's name became a cautionary tale, whispered in command rooms across countless worlds, a symbol of pride turned to ruin by the very beings he had mocked. Earthlings walked among the ashes of their own cities unbowed and unbroken, planning not revenge but preparation for the future, knowing that the galaxy would continue to challenge them, yet confident that the ingenuity, courage, and unrelenting will that had brought them this far would carry them further than anyone dared imagine. Every human on the planet felt the surge of connection to every ancestor who had faced impossible odds, every scientist, engineer, and soldier becoming part of the living proof that survival was not enough, that victory was not given but taken, and that the spirit of humanity could turn even the smallest chance into absolute triumph. The stars above shone differently now, as if acknowledging the presence of a species that could not be ignored, a species that would not be conquered, and a species that had shaken the foundations of empire simply by refusing to bow. The galaxy would remember the day the ground shook, the day that laughter turned to terror, the day humanity claimed not only victory, but respect and fear and admiration all at once. For Earthlings there was no jubilation, only quiet determination, the understanding that the fight had ended but the journey had just begun, and that every step forward would be taken with the lessons of the past and the promise of the future etched into the marrow of their bones. The planet hummed beneath their feet, alive with the pulse of its champions, alive with the certainty that humans had become more than survivors. They had become legends. The alien fleets would rebuild, they would try again. But the Earth that shook the galaxy would be ready, every soldier, every civilian, every mind prepared to face whatever came next, and to do so with the unshakable certainty that humanity never surrendered, never faltered, and never underestimated itself. The story of the general who laughed and the humans who made the ground quake would echo for centuries, a tale of ingenuity, courage, and unbreakable will, a tale that proved that no matter the odds, humanity could rise above everything. The end.